So as I'm sure you've seen in the last week or so, some footage has come out showing the load time difference between the PlayStation 4 and the PlayStation 5 hardware, and oh man. So seeing the difference in load times between the PlayStation 5 and the PlayStation 4 got me thinking about something that is, always been a part of my gaming experience and yours as well, and that is crippling anxiety. Subscribe. Of course, what I'm actually talking about is loading screens. They're kind of, going the way of the dodo. They're going extinct, like T-Rex or Electronic Arts' reputation. Loading screens have been common in games for a really long time. For a lot of games, when going from one area to another, from one cell to another, when fast traveling, a lot of games just can't process that in real time, so there's a loading screen. But a lot of games in recent years have been able to minimize and sometimes reduce loading screens that you see in-game with certain tricks. Some games use background loading, some games use loading areas like an elevator that you step into, and while the elevator's in transit, it's, discarding the cell that you were in and loading the cell that you're about to go into. I remember playing Mass Effect 1 on the Xbox, and you would step into the elevator, and it was the longest elevator ride of my life. And then years later, I got Mass Effect 1 on the PC, installed on a solid-state drive, and it was the fastest elevator ride of my life. It's kind of funny, you step into the elevator, the doors close, and then they open 1 second later, and it's a new room. It's like, did this elevator just teleport? Elevator? More like teleportation room. And then, of course, there's games like Anthem that, despite the fact that people are installing them on solid-state drives, they take so long to load, you could go make a sandwich and come back and it still wouldn't be loaded. But to be fair, it's the same story with, like, Fallout New Vegas when you have 247 mods installed. But on the other hand, I've actually heard some developers say that despite the game being optimized to the point where they don't need loading screens, they actually put them in anyway, sometimes for story purposes, to explain some lore of the world, or to give you tips. That kind of sounds like my marriage. That's a good one. But the new hardware that we're seeing in this next generation of consoles, the PlayStation 5 is going to have a solid-state drive in it. I would assume that the next Xbox is going to have one too. They would be at a serious competitive disadvantage if they didn't. But seeing solid states in consoles is going to be awesome. Contrary to what a lot of people think, the processor isn't really the bottleneck when it comes to loading a game. It's the data storage. And so switching from disk drives to solid-state drives, they're just so much faster. Way faster. Something that's exciting about this next generation of consoles is that, although PCs always have and always will be more powerful than consoles, that gap is starting to narrow, and that's really cool. And I think this next generation of consoles is going to be really awesome. So as time progresses, I think we're going to see fewer and fewer loading screens. And I kind of have mixed feelings about it. Nobody likes a really long loading screen, but loading screens have gotten really good in recent years. A lot of times they have lore about the game. They explain things about the story or the world that you're playing in. Lots of loading screens have really beautiful art from the game. Some loading screens have 3D assets from the game that you can move around and really look at in detail. And a lot of them have things like strategies and tips that help you become better at the game and help you to understand it better. All of those things are cool, and in my opinion, they do provide value to me as a person who's playing the game. And while again, I don't want really long loading screens, a brief loading screen with some useful information, some nice art, or things like that is not really very obtrusive to me. In fact, something that kind of annoys me is I install my games on a solid-state drive, and there have been so many instances where I'm playing a game, I push E to enter a new room, the loading screen pops up, and then there's a tip on the bottom. And I'm like, cool, a tip, I want to read that. And before I can get halfway through the tip, it's already loaded. And I'm like, I didn't get to read it. I know, first world problems, but still, when the game loads so fast that you can't take advantage of the useful information on a loading screen, or you can't appreciate the art that's there, it's kind of annoying. What some games do, which I appreciate, is that, they'll show the loading screen and they'll load the game, and then they'll give you the option to press a button to leave the loading screen and actually jump into the game. Metro 2033 comes to mind. I played that recently, and it was cool because the loading screen showed you some lore of the story. It provided some narrative context for the level that you were about to jump into. And despite the fact that the game loaded much faster than I could read the information, they didn't just kick you out of the loading screen, they let you push a button once you were done reading it or once it was done being narrated. And I think that's a good idea. But again, in the future, I think we're going to see fewer and fewer loading screens. As the hardware gets faster, developers just aren't going to rely on them as much. Now, I do think some developers are going to continue to put them in for the reasons that we talked about before. And if they want to do that for artistic or mechanical purposes, I think that's totally fine, as long as they're not super obtrusive. Anyways, I'd love to hear your guys' thoughts. What do you think about the idea of loading screens going away forever? Do you think they will go away forever? Do you kind of like loading screens as long as they're not obtrusively long? Tell me your thoughts in the comments, I'd love to hear. And if you're looking for another video to watch, consider clicking this one right here. If you're not subscribed already, click my face, and maybe consider sharing this video with a friend. They might enjoy it, and they might think that you're cool for sharing a good video with them. I mean, hopefully this video was good. I hope. Ooh, I gotta sneeze.